What a headshot! What a head!
How's it, guys? This is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now, in this video, I'm going to be continuing my positional review video from the pricing mistakes, and today we're going to focus on the best defenders to go for. Now, I know what you guys have been drafting. You've been going for those big at the backs. We've got some massive premium defenders this season at pretty respectable prices, but which defenders should you guys be going for, and are you missing some underpriced options that are slightly cheaper? Well, don't worry, in this video, I'm going to be going over all the good stats, the value per 90 minutes, the points per 90 minutes, all that good stuff, to hopefully by the conclusion of this, give you guys the best options to look at. Now, if you guys are new to the channel, hopefully you consider subscribing, going for our 4th top 10k finish in the last 5 seasons, some really respectable ranks, so hopefully you guys can join me on this journey. But without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So the first graph that you guys are going to see on screen right now is the exact same graph, just with some color coding, some color correction from the pricing mistakes video, and that's going to be the graph on screen here, which compares the points from last season to the price of this season. Now, the reason for this is I want to show you guys some linear regression, some averaging, to show you if these options are underpriced or overpriced. So go check that video out if you guys did miss it, as I did go in a little bit more in depth. So as you can see on the right hand side, we've got the usual suspects, the Trents, the Cancelos, the Robertsons. I did also mention in that video that Trent and Robbo are actually correctly priced by FPL, even though most people have been saying they're underpriced. We also have Van Dijk, Matip, who provide some good value for money if they do start every game. Pretty sure Van Dijk will, but maybe Matip will have some rotation. Laporte, Diaz, also some really respectable stats there, but Laporte currently outperforming Diaz because he did start more minutes. Now, if you guys remember in that video, I did apologize for the left-hand side, the bottom left. Everything's a little bit cluttered. So let's clean that up, take the premium assets out, and let's focus on those cheaper assets. So on screen, you guys can see I've gone from 4 million to 5.5. Unfortunately, there was no 4.0 options that were included in my 60 plus point criteria, but we do have a whole load of 4.5s and also 5 mils. In terms of the 5.5s, we have Thiago Silva, Alonso. Alonso currently, don't really know if he's going to be exiting Chelsea this season, but that's what I thought he would in the transfer window, but he might actually be still at the club. Thiago Silva though and Stones, both centre backs for the respective teams, if they do start the majority of minutes, I can understand them being worth it, but right now I think most people are avoiding them, and I do think that that's fair. In terms of the linear regression line, you guys might be noticing a shift here. I did actually only use the linear regression for the points that you see on screen right now, so this is not including a Trent, a Cancelo, that sort of thing. I just wanted to show you guys the average amongst the 4.5s to 5.5s. But now what I wanted to do is kind of hone in on these 4.5s and these 5.0 millions, because a lot of people have actually been looking at a cheap option on the bench, or maybe they've spent too much money in their attack department and they therefore need a 5.5 and they couldn't afford maybe a Perisic. So the first grouping that we're going to be looking at are going to be the 4.5 defenders, and this season there's a plethora of options and they really are good value for money. And unfortunately, that's what you're going to have to decide. If you go for a big at the back, you're not going to really have this value for money from a 4.5. But if you guys have included one, as I did in my draft, which 4.5 should you guys be looking at? What I did was I took all the 4.5s, I arranged them from left to right, worst to best in terms of points from last season, and that's the graph that you guys can see on screen right now. So the points that I want to talk to you guys about is that if you look at the right hand side, there's some options that I've not seen in any people's drafts. It's going to be the Crystal Palace defenders, and then also we have Mings and Janssen from Brentford. Now, if you guys did watch my goalkeeper video yesterday, I mentioned Guaita, and whatever Crystal Palace goalkeeper there's going to be between the sticks this season will get you some FPL points. Similar thinking with the centre backs. I think whatever centre back pairing they go for, as long as it's going to be one of these two options, I do think Anderson is going to be a great asset to potentially look at. Both these two Crystal Palace centre-backs had some attacking threat last season, getting 1 or 2 assists or goals last season, and that's, I think, it's a perfect combination between defensive and attacking threat. Even Mitchell comes in from Crystal Palace, you know, the fullback. He provided some good threat there, not as much as the centre-backs though. But the one thing I want to call out with these 4.5s is that this is not taking into account any kind of per 90 minute stats. We're not really looking at points or value per 90 minutes, so please keep that in mind, but don't worry, be a little bit patient, those graphs are coming up. You guys can pause the video right now if you want to look for some more assets to kind of potentially look at, but I've highlighted my important talking points, so let's now turn our attention to those 5.0 defenders. So on screen right now, you guys can see the 5.0 defenders, and FPL has actually done us a favor with pricing some of these assets so cheap. So the first option I want to talk about is going to be Gabriel from Arsenal. So most people are going for a Tomiyasu, a Ben White at 4.5. I can understand that, but the best Arsenal asset in terms of points is actually going to be Gabriel. But to be honest, I don't think many options will actually go from because of Ben White and Tomiyasu at 4.5. But if those options become rotation risks, I think Gabriel might be the one to go for. Cody, also special mention here. Connor Cody always comes in quite cheap, but when he does play, he usually gets some points. And even though Wolves had a pretty terrible last season, he still managed to get in the high rankings. We then have Eric Dyer, who fulfilled a new position at centre back for Spurs, and this just shows if there are any nailed Spurs defenders to go for, I think they're going to be worth it at their price point. They get clean sheets under Conte, they look better defensively. Those fullbacks are where my attention will be, but if you guys want to go for maybe a cheaper option, Eric Dyer could be the one to look at. Now, before we talk about the best option here, I want to talk about Cucurella because he's all in the news of a potential move to Man City. And I would say if he's going to be nailed in that Pep Guardiola starting 11 like Cancelo was at 5.0 million, I think we just have to get him in. If he does stay at Brighton, though, not the worst option in the world, but I definitely would prefer him at Man City. So let's hold thumbs and hope that he gets the move and that he is going to be nailed. But the best option, in my opinion, is going to be Matty Cash, and the stats prove it, I prove it, the eye test proves it. I think that Matty Cash under Stevie G for Aston Villa is going to rake in the points this season at 5.0. Attacking threat is definitely there, you just have to hope that Aston Villa show up defensively. We saw Mings in the prior point raking up those clean sheets, so maybe Cash, if they do keep it up, great 5.0 in my opinion. As with the prior talking point, if you guys want to pause it, look at these other options, please do so, but I'm going to move on right now. So the next talking point, and I think this is honestly probably the most important graph to look at, or maybe the value per 90 minutes also be quite important, but there's going to be the points per 90 minutes for each of these defenders. Now this graph might be a little bit cluttered on the left hand side, but please look at the right hand side because that's where all your focus should be, and these are the options that scored the most points when they did play games. No surprise, or maybe a little bit of surprise there, it's going to be Matt Doherty from Spurs at that fullback position. When he played, he scored points, and we were lucky to be in the receiving end of that towards the end of last season. But unfortunately, who kind of knows what's going to happen with that fullback position? Apparently, they're going to be signing Spence from Middlesbrough, so there could be some rotation there, but right off the bat, I think that Doherty, if he does recover from that injury, should be first choice at the start of the season. There's just something about Doherty, an attacking fullback. He loves to get a goal and he racks up those assists throughout the season, and that's why I do hope that he recovers from his injury pretty soon and gets a nice full preseason. Coming up next is going to be Reece James. Also, no surprise there. When he played, he scored points. This really will just depend on this season if Chelsea do go back to a back four, as I don't really like him as an asset then. Saying that though, at 6.0 million, that's worth it in my opinion if you guys want to go for a risk. But between him and Chilwell, it's going to be quite hard to know who to go for. That kind of leads into a nice talking point that unfortunately Chilwell was not selected in this criteria because he did not score more than 60 points last season due to quite a long-term injury. Next up though, Robertson, Trent Alexander-Arnold. It's a real surprise here that these two assets have been played every single game. Usually what happens if you play every single game, your per 90 minute stats kind of take a hit. But no, the Liverpool fullbacks are right on top here. And that's why personally I'm going for Robertson over a Diaz just because his output is so consistent and so good. We then have Chalobah for Chelsea, who just shows when he did start, Chelsea usually got some points. Stones, Cancelo, that Man City defense is usually rock solid at the back. And that's why I say, whenever you get a nailed Man City asset, you kind of lock them in. They're absolute FPL gold. I just hope that Cancelo starts the majority of games. And maybe even if Nathan Ake leaves, Stones might be more nailed. There's a few other popular options there like a Van Dijk, an Alonso, a Diaz. All those options are quite strong. Sanchez from Spurs, yet again showing you when Spurs players do play, they do get you points, similar like Chelsea and Man City. We then have Tierney, who might be an outside punt for an Arsenal position if you guys want to go for a defender. And then kind of down the list, we get some worse options who I potentially won't really look at. So conclusion to this talking point is that Trent and Robbo are absolute madness. James gets points when he plays along with Chilwell. I think their points returns pretty similar over 90 minutes. And if Doherty manages to recover from his injury, I think he might be locked in. But now I kind of want to revisit the 4.5 defenders because as I mentioned earlier on, kind of using points per price might not be the best metric to go for. So what I've done is I've gone the points per 90 minutes and then I've gone for the 4.5 options only. So as you guys can see on screen, left to right, worst to best, we have Sanchez and Reguilon, who yet again proves the point that if Spurs defenders do play, they get you points. You just have to hope that they start. Lamptey's ex-liveliness is off the chart there. Nice to see him. Aït-Nouri, an option we mentioned in my first draft before the price releases. And it's also nice to see Tomiyasu at 4.5, great asset to go for in terms of points per 90 minutes in this range. Right now, Tomiyasu is my favorite asset to go for. I do hope that he is nailed. I know Hector Bellerin is back in training, actually played the preseason game. Is he going to start instead of maybe Tomiyasu? Who kind of knows? I just hope the Japanese international does start. We then have Crystal Palace. I generally love the Crystal Palace defense in these metrics. They seem to be total stats busters, and Anderson comes in at the middle of the park. So conclusion to this graph is that if we can get some 4.5 Spurs action, that's what we'll go for, but otherwise Tomiyasu or maybe an Aït-Nouri look like quite sensible options. Now going on to the penultimate graph that I'm going to show you guys, and this is going to be all about value, which is basically points divided by price or points per million that you guys can get these assets in at. Top right there is an option we spoke about with the 5.0s. The best value defender actually in the game right now is going to be Matty Cash from Aston Villa, and then he's followed up quite closely by Gabriel from Arsenal. So this just shows you that if you guys do go for Gabriel, the nailed Arsenal defender is actually the better one to go for, even though he comes in more expensive at 5.0. You just kind of have to hope that he is the most nailed centre back to go for, which I would kind of agree with, as sometimes Ben White was a little bit hit or miss. Cancelo, Matip and Van Dijk. Cancelo a little bit surprising there, but I think it's just because he comes in slightly cheaper than Trent does, and I think he's going to be worth his value in gold as long as he does start for Pep Guardiola. Matip, Van Dijk though, nice to see the centre backs from Liverpool getting some love here. Usually it's going to be Trent and Robertson, but like Alisson, Van Dijk or Matip could be quite good value picks. The Crystal Palace centre backs up next. Nice to see that they're getting some love yet again, like the goalkeepers. So if you guys want to go for an outside punt, I do think Crystal Palace are being overlooked. Other than that though, you guys can go down the list as you do. Please pause the video right now, but I'm going to be moving on. So the last graph I want to go over is going to be kind of value per 90 minutes, which combines the points per 90 minutes with the value, just to show you guys a little bit of a different metric. So no surprise here, we saw Doherty have the best points per 90 minutes. So because he's so cheap, I think that Doherty's a great asset to go for as long as he does play. Chalobah, with all the centre backs leaving from Chelsea, maybe he will get a shot in that starting 11, because when he does play, he gets you points, but I think that's just because Chelsea's defense is pretty good as well. Sanchez and James. Sanchez showing those are cheap Spurs defenders could be quite good value, whereas with James, great Chelsea asset to go for as long as he is in that back five and he is more attacking. Another thing to note is that I have actually cut off the metric here because I don't want to go for all these cheaper options, so I've actually cut it off at 0.8 where Cancelo just comes in clutch. But overall guys, to kind of conclude this video, what I wanted to show you is that yes, we do have these great assets like a Trent and a Robertson, but please don't overlook the cheaper assets. Just because they are cheaper doesn't mean they're worse, and you could actually get some massive value per your million if you go for one of these cheaper options. But saying that though, I do still think that the back four or back five is the way to go this season. With how many cheap options in the defense we do have, and the premiums coming slightly cheaper than expected, I just think that you're kind of crazy not to go for a stacked four. Let me know what current defenders you're going to be going for, as well as let me know what the defender you think is going to return the most points. Is it going to be Trent, Cancelo, or Robbo? Or will we see a massive outside punt like a Perisic, as these stats are quite good in Serie A? But this is basically wrap the video guys. Hopefully you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you did and subscribe if you're not subscribed yet. I'll be seeing you guys for more content coming up. We've got the midfielders up next and then the forwards to look forward to, and also a massive amount of content throughout the preseason. So make sure that bell notification is on, but otherwise I'm going to be signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL and I'm out. Cheers, bye.